Well, thank you. Thank you, Peter, for that introduction. And thank you all for being here today for what is the biggest issue that our nation faces today. But I think, Rafe, I'll disagree with you a little bit there. I'll say, as an honorary Ulsterman who stood for Parliament in Northern Ireland, we do have strength in diversity. We have the Scots, we have the Welsh, we have the English, and we have the Northern Irish. But of course, the sun is shining today here in Westminster, but it's also shining in the Channel. And by the time I think we conclude our day, another 600 or so dinghywalas, as I like to call them, would have landed on the Kent coast in the latest wave of this invasion of illegal economic migration. Not the least aided and abetted by our border force, acting, I think, as the special ferry service, unwittingly working in some bizarre tandem with organized criminal gangs, pushing these desperate people to our shores. Now, yet as seriously concerning as it is, young, undocumented men of unknown backgrounds swarming first Europe and hopping across the Channel to our shores, I think the fact that our sieve-like borders and our special taxi service border force and our hands tied behind our back by the ECHR, it is not the alarming numbers of the illegal economic migrants that are the only issue of concern when it comes to our broken immigration system. It is the unsustainable, infrastructure breaking, NHS waitlisting, house crowding, traffic jamming, wage busting numbers of legal migration that are simply not in Britain's national interest. Now, hear me out as to why. Hear me out as to why the million new arrivals in our well-meaning quest for the best and brightest from around the world, but completely off track, filling up our towns and cities in this uncontrolled free-fall, is simply not in Britain's national interest. Why the unprecedented 3,287,404 tick-box visas granted in the year ending June 2023, of which 657,481 were for students and their dependents, 525,985 for work groups and their dependents. And out of the 1,808,072 visitor visas issued, the estimate is that around 100,000 would be overstayers. And that's not to add those coming from non-visa countries, overstaying in their hundreds of thousands. And the fact that we can't even get reliable numbers, despite the new e-gates, which seldom work, by the way, and the tireless work that our immigration enforcement teams do, we have anti-national NGOs and pressure groups working to frustrate the basic of law and order in removing those with no right to be here. Again, not in Britain's national interest. Of course, our prosperity, our rule of law, free democracy, our warm-hearted, welcoming people, as well as being our greatest qualities, are also our greatest pulls to millions around the world today. And for most of the arrivals coming in today to our shores, I think one word can sum them up: money. Be it the genuine young student who wants a top British degree under their belt, or the so-called asylum seekers playing our system hand in glove with dodgy immigration consultants cooking up stories of persecution, or the unskilled economic migrant who is attracted by low-skilled but relatively higher-paying jobs which they would get paid in their countries of origin, or the dinghywalas paying thousands to criminal gangs to be put up in four-star hotels to then slightly melt away into the shadow gig economy to exist solely within their own siloed communities, or join the army of mopedwalas delivering a wide variety of merchandise across our county lines. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong whatsoever with aspiration and ambition to build a better life. In fact, I'd say if you're putting yourself through the grueling hardships of trekking across continents, you're doing so for a better life. But it is what drives such quests from both illegal economic migrants and today's legal economic migrants and the bogus overstayers that lays at the heart of why such out-of-control mass immigration is simply not in Britain's national interest. You see, when my grandfather first came to England all the way back in 1959, he did traveling from Uganda, albeit a decade prior to Idi Amin. He did so because, like millions like him from India, the Caribbean, Kenya, had a certain affinity for Britain. They felt a sense of kinship to make Vilayat, that is Blighty, their home. Of course, there's no denying that my grandfather's generation didn't have their own societal and economic issues of integration and settlement. Of course they did. But you know what? His generation, they persevered. The British people through the 50s, through the 60s and 70s persevered and came out the other side as a nation that was at ease with this pluralist nature of Indian cuisine becoming the nation's favorite and British Indians becoming a very integral part of our national tapestry. Immigration that worked to be in Britain's national interest. But that worked because not only did my grandfather's generation want to be here, but they stayed here despite the immense hardships, both societal and economic. There existed an unwritten national contract of not just wanting to be here to make Britain our home, but to want Britain to make us one of her own. Just like I did when I first came to England as an 8-year-old speaking just 2 words of English on day 1 of school, and yet within 6 months I had added a few words, more words to my English, and within 2 years passed my 11 plus to get a place at, say, local grammar, and then a few years later went on to join the FCO. And that is a story familiar to so many families up and down the country, of perseverance, hard work, grit and determination, and above all, integration in Britain's national interest. Now, my grandfather would often tell me about, now hear me out on this, because as in today's Britain, there'd be a complete meltdown in some North London metropolitan liberal elite postcodes. Because the BBC, yes, the BBC, our national broadcaster, used to broadcast a weekly weekend TV program in the 60s, 70s, and 80s called Apna Hi Ghar Samjhiye, meaning make yourself at home. And then changing it to Nai Zindagi, Naya Jeevan, making new ways in a new life. Now, this effort by a national broadcaster went a long way to provide informal language and civics lessons to help immigrants from the subcontinent integrate better with wider society and get on with becoming one with society. Of course, in 2023, until recently, at least 20 of our international universities were not even requiring basic English language proficiency certification in a bid to hoover up the cash cows that are international students. Now, leaving aside genuine international students, how do you expect, and this is something I've seen firsthand, a student who has little or no spoken English language skills most likely fail to reach the academic standards required to gain entry in their home country to a reputable university is rather unusually, for most genuine students, probably already married, and is likely to be someone who brought with them the record 149,000 student dependents just last year. I lost my place just like you, Raf. It's taking longer. Dependents. And the only window into British society they've had before coming over to the UK is called TikTok. Now, to come in and to listen and to learn whatever course they might be subscribed to in English, work officially for the 20 allotted hours they can, and in many cases full-time, and the same for the overstaying illegal immigrants, communicate with the teachers of their children in the oversubscribed schools in our communities, talk to the 8 a.m. rush to get an appointment doctors who treat them, and the bankrupt councils who provide stretched local services, and relate at the same time with their neighbors and local communities. Now, I'm very clear. Either you're here to make Britain your home, to be proud of our history, speak our languages, celebrate our traditions, make our heritage your own, align with our values as your own, or you're simply an economic unit, here to earn and send money back to the place you do actually call home. And that is not in Britain's national interest. Look, the truth is, this country has allowed whole communities to be built into self-segregating silos. Whole swathes of towns and cities, be it London or Birmingham, resemble areas, often traditionally white working-class communities, which bear little resemblance to how a truly integrated and pluralistic society ought to be, as even was until a couple of decades prior. Where not only has multicultural integration failed, but in so many places where a vocal minority of next generation of immigrant communities have regressed into cultural essentialism, and where the flow of cross-community social interaction, dare I say, is restricted as much as Sadiq Khan's Ula zone, where immigrants deal largely with other immigrants, are often exploited by unscrupulous agents, be it finding work, finding a place to live, or even the very immigration lawyers, fleecing them for tens of thousands of pounds to game our system, to settle people, to get leave to remain granted by the misplaced officials in the Home Office. And that's the other big elephant in the room, the great blob that is the Home Office. With so many of its officials, more left-wala activists and less civil servants serving Britain's national interest. And their immigration lawyer partners in the great game of grabbing UK residency, be the tens of thousands of non-European origin EU citizens. Now hear me out on this. I've seen a fair few Indian origin Portuguese nationals who've exploited the UK's generous EU settlement scheme, or the 10-year route, or the 5-year route, or the 3-year route, or the more infamous right to family and private life route, leveraged by tens or hundreds of thousands using their children as their route to UK settlement. Or wait for this. Forget the sham marriages of the 90s and the 2000s. This is the latest. The lawyers advising couples to invent domestic issues for the wife to first gain settled status and then handing their children to the custody of the estranged husband so that he may then gain settled status because of his British citizen child. And all the while claiming universal credit, working all hours, while having most likely started off as a student visa arrival or as an overstay. And look, the truth is, every dinghiwala takes a space of a genuine refugee, much like the Ugandan Indians back in the 70s. Every unskilled immigrant takes a job which should be better paying and being done by one of the 5 million economically inactive. And every overstayer is a slap in the face of every legal immigrant who jumped through endless Foreign Office hoops to do the right thing to make Britain home. And I'll tell you what, when I last visited the Punjab in the summer, the endless amount of ads, and I think I spoke about this to you, Peter, earlier, ads from a long list of immigration agents I saw was, get your student visa and spouse visa before UK law changes in September. That is the audacity that we are dealing with. Now, it is clear the drive and ambition behind so many of those who want to immigrate to Britain or the US or Canada or Australia is not some underlying affinity for England, but merely the opportunity of making money and an easier way of life. And therein lies the problem. As with my grandfather's generation, if there isn't that unwritten national contract, that warm feeling of wanting to be proudly British, striving to speak the language well, to integrate well, and to get on well with your neighbours, and contribute to building a Britain as your own, well, the truth is, I largely agree with the Home Secretary, because much of this mass immigration feeds into this failed experiment, as Raf was saying earlier, of multiculturalism, where people are actively discouraged to have this unwritten national contract, where you actually make this place your home, share in our British way of life, where you take a little, you add a little, and build some more for Britain, where you become a national, not a resident. Now, the answers, I think, are quite simple. in common sense terms, common sense conservatives, that's certainly the wing I'm from in the party, to this mad dingy rush Ponzi scheme of a never-ending escalator of immigration that has broken the urban housing market, exploited both the millions of immigrants and our generous social welfare systems and public services, and created a nation that is creaking under an ever-decreasing birth rate, with nearly 60% of the addition of our population coming directly since the turn of the century from direct immigration. That is in so many places destructive to our long-established communities, discounting our traditions and culture and the very long-defined characteristics of our nation, our very nationhood, of what makes us British. Now, there will be pushback, as there already has been. Look at things happening across Europe, or even look further afield. We saw Prime Minister Modi trying to push through better provisions for genuinely persecuted refugees from around South Asia under the Citizenship Amendment Act in 2019. The same globalist quarters. Now, the answer, I think, is also to deliver what the Conservative Party has been promising for 13 years, to bring down net migration to the tens of thousands. Now, of course, we know the only boat that has so far been stopped is the BB Stockholm. It's true. But let's actually stop the boats. Whilst the government's action, to ramp up fines for employers caught giving jobs to illegal immigrants is welcome, of course it is, but enough with the wishy-washy obsession of talking and stalling and talking with the Europeans who themselves are unwilling to deal with the illegal immigration invasion. Just look at Lampedusa, or the stream of German NGOs dropping off people on the Italian coast, or the treatment of Poland and Hungary for standing up for themselves, or giving more money to the French. Let's be honest, how many millions have we given to them? We even, I think, sent them the fence that we used for the G7 meeting in Wales a few years ago to put up in Calais, but little good did that do. But I think much touted is the Australian model, but I think we have the capacity and the will to make our own model, the British model. Look, we're already picking up every single dinghy-walla that crosses. So the only solution, I think, to make this work as an actual deterrent is for the Royal Navy to safely pick them up and drop them back on the French coast every single day. Rinse and repeat. Let's stop splurging £8 million every single day. And let's stop kicking out our own students from university halls to house illegal economic migrants. And you know what? And this is something that's very close and personal to me. Let's stop desecrating the glorious memory of the generation who fought to deliver the freedoms we enjoy today. Let's not disrespect the great legacy of the dam-buster squadron by turning our once proud RAF Scampton into a holding pen for those that have zero affinity for Britain and zero respect for our borders and the rule of law. Let's rejuvenate our institutions so that they are there first for our own students and then for genuine international students. Let's clamp down on the activist leftist lawyers who exploit our generosity for settling those who can't be even bothered to speak and learn the language. Let's end dependent visas and then see how many want to be an international student. And once again, I have lost my place. Please. Truth is, Britain is a civilizational nation, and her great civilization is our inheritance. And being British is a privilege. So let's stop devaluing it by giving away citizenship faster than a socialist can spend other people's money. Let's regain some self-respect and start once again to attach value to our citizenship, so that only those who will add value to and value Britain are welcomed here. That is in Britain's national interest. But let's also wake up the 5 million economically inactive, to get up for a fair day's pay and do the jobs that so many of the corporate money bags have exploited cheap foreign labor to do. That is in Britain's national interest. And you know what? Let's set some record-breaking numbers that we'd actually love to see. Incentivize for our own people to have children. Tax breaks that back those who back marriage. Build strong families, that build strong communities, that build a strong economy, that builds pride in our nationhood, that conserves the great British nation. That, ladies and gentlemen, is in Britain's national interest. Thank you.
Thank you for that speech. It's very interesting. I'm being heckled by Google Books. A couple of times you mentioned those who spend their time assisting the would-be illegal immigrants coming into the country. And it's often said that the devil has all the best music. I wonder if it's a necessary truth that the left always have the best lawyers.
Thank you for your talk. You've contrasted like the 50s with the sort of recent present, and talk about values from then to now. I think one of the things is the, if you like, sort of a theoretical change that's been, particularly not in communities, but this has been done something by professionals, you know. I mean, I grew up in the 1980s. I was a student in the 1980s. And we saw the rise of Margaret Thatcher's sort of, and one of the things that was said there was self-interest, you know. And the left have sort of taken that, I think, through John Rawls. And when they talk about justice, they equivocate. They're equivocating across time and equivocating across concepts. So they talk about justice as if it's a moral obligation. But really what it is it's a version of self-interest. So there's a historical change that's been re-described in terms of data, post facto, post-1971. I wonder if you say...
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes. It's not immigration that's causing social cohesion. It's a cultural shift by scientists, really, human scientists.
Okay.
Is that...
Well, I mean, look.
The question is putting the cultural shift in relation to the theoretical shift since the Second World War.
Okay, well, I think I'll just make one point. Well, first of all, I think there's a lot of crossover there with the left. Well, look, I think traditionally it is the left who are the agitators. They are the ones who have the lack of trust in their fellow man. Whereas on the right, you expect the average man and woman to do the right thing. So you don't necessarily are inherently agitating in that way. And that goes a long way, I think, to explain why the left always has the most active lawyers, because they want to abuse those loopholes that the average person on the right would never think that somebody would be abusing. But to come to you, sir, I mean, look at it this way. I disagree completely that it is self-interest that has changed Britain in the way it has. On the contrary, I think the fact that Margaret Thatcher and the Conservatives in the 70s, well, late 70s and 80s, and even, dare I say, into the 90s, invigorated the individual to stand up for themselves, to have the freedom and the liberty, to have aspiration. But it doesn't mean that is opposite of having strong local communities. And the same is very, very true over in India, for example. It is only since the economic liberalization since the 90s, that you've had more unity in Indian diversity, that you had more people from the south of India, from the north of India, saying, yes, we're Indian first. And the same applies here. If you have food on your table, if you have a decent education there for your children, if you have the health care that you and your family require, you will be proud to say you're British. That's what it boils down to. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello. If you're enjoying the New Culture Forum channel and you believe in our mission, may I invite you to join our membership scheme at the link below or on our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. Our work is more important now than ever, and we have great plans ahead for the future, but we can't do it without your support. From as little as £3 per month, you can help ensure that we continue on our mission. As a member, you'll receive a range of benefits, including access to exclusive content, invitations to our private events, including here at our studios, free copies of our books, and much, much more, including, of course, our famous NCF mug. If you aren't able to become a member, then please help us by clicking this button and subscribing to our channel. It's completely free. Just remember to also click the bell icon so that you can get notifications when we post new videos. Thank you.